One of the guys who I think tries to tell the truth, and that is very rare. I have no time, nor will we give any time on this program to anybody who's trying to schlep something, and they have an agenda, and they're not at least trying, to be honest. Mark Halperin is a guy who wrote the book Double Down, Game Change 2012, and it has raised some eyebrows because he lets the axe fall where the axe falls and is not trying to cut it one way or another, and can tell us exactly what happened in the election of 2012 and some of the really important moments that we all watched, but we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Senior political analyst for Time Magazine and a co-author of the new book, Double Down, Mark Halperin, welcome to the program.
Honored to be here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let's start with this. The president is going to make some statement today at 11:30 Eastern Time on the Affordable Care Act. That maverick, John McCain, is now saying we should have a full repeal of it. That was basically exactly what the people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee were saying, and that maverick was saying that it was insane. What do you think the president is going to say today? Any idea?
Well, I think he's bowing to the political reality that, if the program isn't working and Democrats are starting to worry about their electoral chances, the president has left himself with not that many allies in Washington, not that many people loyal to him, and he's going to have to try to fix the program for this current set of problems. But as we all know, as the program gets implemented, there are going to be more problems. And if he can't get kind of a working relationship going, this thing is going to never be implemented the way he wants and not be implemented in a way that could possibly be good for the country.
Okay, so you say that he hasn't left himself many allies, and yet the press carries water for this guy like I've never seen before. So what's the secret sauce here?
Well, I've talked about this throughout my career. I prefer to cover politics or write about elections and campaigns and governance. But in the age in which we live, you can't ignore, if you're a political reporter, the role the media plays. And I've said that throughout my career, particularly when the president was running in 2008, but beyond that, there's an obvious slant in much of the media towards Democrats. And even as I tell liberals who balk when I say that, even if you don't believe that, recognize that half the country or so feels alienated from a lot of the press because they perceive that kind of slant and bias, and it's just not good for the country. It's not good for democracy to have people feeling like the press is slanted in one direction.
Have you gotten close enough to, I have felt for a long time that, first of all, Valerie Jarrett is she's the iron fist in the White House. And between the two of them, the president and the first lady is probably the tougher nut between those two. What is her role, politically speaking? And is this what I just said? Is that anything close to true?
Well, look, the president's gotten elected twice and got elected to that Senate seat in Illinois in a competitive primary. He's a pretty tough guy politically. I think when it comes to governance, we've seen his skills are not as good, at least not so far. First Lady, we read about in Double Down, at first wasn't sold on his running for a second term, but then decided it was really important that he'd be a two-term president, so people didn't dismiss him as kind of an historical aberration. And she used her popularity very hard at key moments and around that Denver debate that was mentioned to try to make sure the president got reelected. And she is very tough and very unyielding. When something she cares a lot about, she makes it plain within the White House that it's a priority to her.
So the Denver debate, Al Gore said that was due to the altitude. Of course, we all believe that it was the altitude, but besides the altitude, what else was going on behind the scenes when the president got his head handed to him?
Yeah, it was a major performance failure, in part because there's this myth that Barack Obama is a great communicator. He's never been good at debates. Go back and look at his debates with Alan Keyes in the Senate race in Illinois. He's just not a great debater. In addition, he had in his head a lot of animosity towards Mitt Romney, a lack of respect, and his aides were just really beside themselves leading up to that debate, saying you don't want to show how much you disdain the guy. And they kind of told him just lay low, just be.
Why does he hate him? Why did he hate him?
He thought Mitt Romney was a phony, and that Mitt Romney was running for all the wrong reasons, was disavowing his record in Massachusetts as governor. And that disdain led them
just a second. I'm sorry. It's like you hit me in the head with a frying pan or a telephone pole.
Yeah.
The president thought someone else was a phony.
That's what he thought.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
That's saying something. I mean, when the king of phonies, when, the guy who says, it reminds me of my father's flag draped coffin. Yeah. When that guy thinks you're a phony, wow, that's saying something. Whoa.
You just had no respect for him at all going into this debate?
He really didn't. He thought he was disqualified by his actions in the conduct of the race, and they just didn't want him to show that disdain, so they told him to kind of lay low in the debate. And you saw that just a ridiculously bad performance by the president that led them to feel like he could lose the election. And while they were publicly saying, "Oh, everything's fine," privately, as the president rehearsed for the second debate, they got really worried that he might lose the second debate, and they thought if that happened, the election could swing the other way.
No, he would have. I think it would have. I think it would have. And luckily, Romney decided that his tactic was going to be, I'm going to agree with everything the president says.
Yeah, me too. You think so? Me too.
Me too.
Me too. I'm just going to
keep
say
you
that.
in office.
Yeah, the Me Too strategy didn't go very well for him at all. Now, you made some revelations in the book, Mark, about the vetting of Romney's running mate, Chris Christie. That
potential running mate,
potential running mate. Mm-hmm. And these are things that apparently were pretty closely guarded by the Romney campaign, and they seem fairly upset that they've come out. But tell us about some of the things that you found out about
Chris Christie.
The Chris Christie vetting.
Well, Governor Romney at first thought, well, maybe I'll pick Chris Christie, and then he looked at some of the things in his background, little scandals, little controversies that had, some of them, if you Googled, you'd see them, but weren't known nationally. And he thought, that's a little too much. I don't want to take on that potential controversy. Then one of his advisors said, look, we're getting killed every day in the media. Barack Obama is dominating this race. We need a street fighter because we're in a street fight. And so he urged him to reconsider Christie. They looked at his background closer, and they found a bunch of stuff. Chris Christie used to be a lobbyist, and one of his clients was an organization that at the time was headed by Bernie Madoff. That's a 30-second ad that writes itself.
Yeah.
He also, when he was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, the Inspector General's office looked at his spending habits when he went on the road for business. All this stuff, nothing like a huge smoking gun, but Mitt Romney thought, this stuff's a little too controversial in the glare of a national campaign. I don't want to take that on. The report they delivered to him, laid that out in black and white, and the next day, after Governor Romney got it and read it, he said, nope, I'm not picking Chris Christie.
So did Chris Christie, that famous walk on the beach, that really that was, I think, the final nail in the coffin. How did that come?
President?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did that come about? I mean, because Chris Christie
to the Romney people. I mean, they had to be.
They had to be crazy.
Yeah, they were crazy. One of Romney's advisors was telling people, people talked about it as a bear hug. He saw it more as a French kiss.
Yeah.
Look, when a governor has a disaster, they tend to look for help from anywhere they can get it, and it's often from presidents. What Romney thought was, look, I understand Christie's governor, but he's also maybe a little being too exuberant here. Why does he need to go as far as he did?
He did.
And I think
that's the thing.
The criticism was you can get help from the president, you can appear with the president, but you got to try to, with days to go before the election, an election so important to the Republican Party, calibrate things a little more.
I think he actually threw that. I think he threw that election because that was the final. That was the final blow. I mean,
and it was right before the election,
right?
So
I mean, and you can't tell me that Chris Christie didn't know. Did he?
He's a savvy guy, but I'll tell you, he's also, and this was Governor Romney's view, he's also kind of an emotional guy. And he was getting no sleep. And here was the President of the United States offering help. And like I said, a lot of Romney people were furious. And to this day, a lot of Romney people are furious about it. But I think that the candidate himself, Governor Romney, thought, well, it's just Chris being Chris, a little over-exuberant, but no doubt that it hurt. And Governor Christie could have, as I said, calibrated it just maybe a little bit more and not lean so hard in favor of the president.
So tell me about the birth certificate with Donald Trump.
This is a great story. You know, the president, like a lot of presidents these days, not frustrated with the media and the kind of superficiality of it. And he was getting asked all the time about Donald Trump trying to make the allegation the president wasn't born in the United States. The president's home in Chicago. This is right as he's starting his reelection campaign in the spring of 11. And he finds a box belonging to his mother that had what he thought might be his birth certificate. It turned out to be kind of like a commemorative booklet from the hospital that showed his little footprints and his mom's name and his name. And he decided, based on that, once he determined it wasn't the birth certificate, he was going to shut Donald Trump up and the birthers up because he thought it was too big a distraction. And he went after him, and then shortly after he released the birth certificate, people might remember at the White House Correspondents' Dinner where the president gives that annual comedy routine, he went after Trump again. And it's a good little scene because we connect the dots on what the president was actually thinking privately about Trump and also tell the story from Trump's point of view as well.
What does he think about Trump?
Does not like Donald Trump.
There's a
he's
surprise.
A carnival barker.
So does he think that Donald Trump might be a fraud?
I would say that would be a good way to frame it in presidential terms. You know, the president has a pretty good sense of humor about what I like to call the political media freak show. But Trump pushed him a little too far, and he wanted to try to slay the giant that is Donald Trump.
Mark, you obviously have pretty good access to these guys. Does the access stop or slow down or get tougher after you write a book like this?
Well, you know, we wrote Game Change in 2000, came out in 2010, and we reported for this book. We did over 500 interviews, extensive cooperation from campaigns on both sides. You know, you read a lot of political books these days just about Republicans, just about Democrats. We've been doing this a long time, have sources in both parties across the board. So far, two books of access was about the same on both of them.
That's why we like this so much, is because, you know, it
cuts both ways.
It cuts both ways.
So tell me this: how do you know when you're writing something like this? Because the weasels in Washington, I don't trust a damn one of them. How do you know when you are not being played? I mean, because you're going to get people who are playing you because of the next election.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How do you know?
Absolutely. Well, partly from doing it a long time and knowing a lot of the people. And, you know, we've got sources who we know maybe don't always have the best memories or conveniently forget things. But if you do 500 interviews and you talk to people, you look at documents, listen to audio tapes, it's very easy in the end to say, you know what, with all due respect, person X, your account doesn't match up with anybody else's. And it goes to motivation, too. We don't really care, in a sense, what people's motives are as long as we're getting the truth of what actually happened. And as I said, you think about most journalists today doing a story, they might do 2 or 3 interviews, maybe a dozen. 500 interviews, and these are long interviews in general. You're just going to get more to the truth, and if there are weasels in the litter, you're going to be able to factor that in as you compare the stories and sift through them.
One of the things that shocked us the most in the book, I think, maybe the thing that shocked us the most in the book, because we know him, is your revelation that John Huntsman Sr. was the source of Reid speculating aloud several times that Mitt Romney didn't pay his taxes for 10 years. And I know the family denies that. We haven't talked to John about that.
Hard to believe.
It's very hard to believe. It's hard to believe. John Huntsman is a very good friend of mine, and I have a really hard time believing it. I haven't asked him myself. I just haven't had a chance to talk to him. I haven't asked him that myself. I would find it really disappointing and hard to believe.
Yep. Look, I know you're friends with him, and he's a great man. And in the reporting for the book, we did a lot of reporting about him, and just across the board, people have the utmost respect for him.
For John Huntsman Sr.
John Huntsman Sr. That's just a great patriot and really one of the most impressive people really in the country. But what we report in the book is that people recall what Senator Reid did was really pretty typical of Senator Reid and something most people wouldn't try to get away with. He walked around just making the claim with no basis, which turned out to be false. The Governor Romney hadn't paid federal income taxes in 10 years. And he said he had a source for that. We report in the book, and like everything in the book, I can tell you it's accurate, that the person he was relying on to make that claim was his friend, John Huntsman Sr. I know a lot of Americans won't necessarily understand that Glenn Beck and Harry Reid share a close friend, but they do. But he's also friends with Michael Moore and a bunch of other people. So John Huntsman Sr. is, like I said, just this one fact is true, but it doesn't mean that he's not also a great man.
That's unbelievable. Take me back to the 47% the thing for a second, because
Sure.
that was one that hit me. Did they realize right away this was a big deal? Did they understand how much of an effect this would have on the tone of the debate?
Yeah, great question. And it's one of the unanswered questions that we'd like to do in these books, is to go back to these big moments that kind of flash out, dominate the news, and then everybody moves on, and try to answer what was really going on. Governor Romney was he was shocked by it. He was disappointed in himself, like often happens with politicians, including Mitt Romney. This mistake happened at the end of a long day when he was exhausted. He was so exhausted that his aide tried to get him to take a nap before that fundraiser because he looked like he needed some rest. And he made the comments. Then months later, the tape comes out. And he was a little bit angry at himself for answering the question. It came in response. What often happens at these fundraisers is donors want to talk politics, and you get lured into kind of being a pundit. And what he said, he thought wasn't controversial. As I know you guys, think about as well. What he was saying was just kind of political analysis. It wasn't meant to be some sort of repudiation of half the country. But he didn't want to apologize for it. And one of the things we write about in the book is, when you write a book, as Mitt Romney did, called No Apology, it makes it hard for you to ever apologize. I put it out there. If he called the book One Man's Story, I think it would have been easier for him to say, look, I was wrong. And the White House expected him to apologize. We write in the book about the president with David Plouffe, his campaign guy, sitting in the back of a presidential limo watching the 47% video on Plouffe's iPhone. And the president says, well, that's going to be a problem. But they assumed Romney would just say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But Governor Romney did not. He didn't want to apologize for a variety of reasons. One was the book, No Apology. Another was he didn't really think he'd said anything wrong. He thought he was just engaged in analysis. They also knew, and this is something we report in the book for the first time, he'd said stuff like that a lot in private fundraisers. And what he was worried about was you apologize for that one, and then some other tape comes out, and another tape comes out.
Wow.
And
that was really a turning point. I mean, that was a big problem for him.
The name of the book is Double Down, Game Change 2012 by Mark Halperin. And Mark, we appreciate the fact that you're coming on the program. We appreciate the fact that you do let the chips fall where they may, and we wish you the best. Thank you so much.
Glenn, I really appreciate it. Guys, thanks for having me on.
You bet.